He can get the money, but can he get the land? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, President Trump may be in a bit of a quandary, according to a property law professor at the University of Texas. He has declared this national emergency with the intention of moving some funds around so he can get his I think the last figure I heard was $5.7 billion to build this wall between the United States and Mexico. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is now saying that a disapproval vote will pass the Senate. In essence, the Senate will say, no, President Trump, you shouldn't declare a national emergency. However, he doesn't have the votes in the Senate to override a presidential veto. And so for all intents and purposes, if the president wishes to pursue this avenue, he's okay. However, Bill, a property law professor at University of Texas, a guy named Christopher Jones, is suggesting that it takes the legislature to take property by eminent domain, and they need property along some 1,000 miles of proposed border fence. Bill, you're a conservative, you're a property rights guy. How do you see this situation in that light? And let me just state up front, there is no certainty about what this property law professor is saying because, frankly, there aren't, according to CNN, a lot of people that they could get a hold of who even knew anything about property law. So it's kind of a dicey area. But as a guy who I suppose would be against government takings in general, and certainly for constitutional processes, what would you do if you were the president in this circumstance?
Well, I'm obviously not an expert on every piece of property on the border, but it seems to me, if we just use a little reason here, that the existing border runs through private property, presumably, correct? Obviously it does. So we have a dividing line, essentially, that is cutting through people's property at the moment. I don't know what the width of the wall would be, but it doesn't seem to me that the wall is going to be a half a mile thick.
But it does seem possible that the land where the border, technically the border line is drawn, may not be suitable for the building of a structure, and so it may not, the fence may not be right on the border. Does that make sense?
Yes. So you're saying that they would have to engineer. They may change the actual the
line.
Scotty,
sure.
Hold on. So basically, what you're saying though is that since we can't push that, so let's assume that the actual existing border does not allow you to build on that particular location. So do we push the wall into Mexico or do we push the wall into America? Now, obviously, I think we push the wall into America, but that means there's some portion of America that's on the other side of the wall, but on this side of the border, right?
That sounds reasonable. And I know a lot of this is speculative, but it made some sense, at least on the basis of the idea that Congress is the one that is able, let's just look at it from a political perspective and not a legalistic perspective, but Congress is the one that is able to do the eminent domain takings. And so if that's the case, President Trump has basically just flouted Congress and gone around them by declaring this national emergency.
Well, you're making you're coming to a sentencing conclusion for a case that has no plaintiffs yet.
Explain that.
Well, you're saying that he's in violation and that as a conservative, I'm in favor of private property. Needless to say, I am. And needless to say, overuse of eminent domain is a real issue and one I'm deeply opposed to. But until we get to some kind of specific case, I don't really know what to offer you up as a potential solution, but let's just play with.
Well, and actually, what I'm saying is, let's say that there is this conflict. Okay, let's posit stipulate that there is this conflict. Okay.
Okay.
What kind of political position is the president then in? Because he has already basically said to Congress, "Hey, I'm going to negotiate with you for weeks and weeks. We can't come to a deal, and I'm going to do what I wanted to do anyway. Oh, by the way, I need a little something from you."
Well, would the president be able to? A president gets a pot of money for this wall, let's say, right? $5 billion. And let's say that we need to move the wall a quarter mile inland, let's say. Can we just not buy that guy's property? Can we not make him an offer that he can't refuse rather than just taking the land from him, which I'm dead set against? here's the thing, Scott.
Well, under the eminent domain statute, typically they give fair market value to the owner, even if he doesn't wish to part with the property.
Well, maybe we should give him more than fair market value, because I don't know how often these cases are going to arise. I don't like the idea of the government taking somebody's property. But as we said before on this, if there was ever a location in the United States where this kind of thing was in fact justified, then surely where your property abuts a foreign country, you certainly would have to say that would be one of the areas where at least this ability to take land for the greater good of the country would be at least on the table. So, again, the whole thing is so hypothetical. I really don't know what to do with it, but I can just list you what the logical preferences seem to be. If my property currently is on the border with Mexico, that means that the southern end of my property is truncated by a line that marks a border with another sovereign nation. Right now, there's either a fence or there's an imaginary line drawn on the ground, whatever it is, but if that wall gets built, there will be a slightly wider area that's off limits to me, but I don't think that's any significant amount of property when you consider the depth of the wall versus the length of the wall. It seems trivial to me. No one's planting an entire field of corn or cactus, for that matter, directly up against the borderline. So I don't know if this argument really bears a whole lot of water. Now, if you've got somebody who just adamantly insisted, this is my property, and you're not going to take a square inch of it, then it's time to say, well, this border needs to be built for the security of the United States of America. How much do you want per square foot or square mile? Because we're not talking about a lot of depth here. This is the main point. It's a line. It's not a mall. We're not talking about putting in an ice skating rink. We're talking about a wall, which is actually pretty narrow. So you say to that guy, well, how much do you want for it? And he gives you a price, and then you pretty much pay it. Look, the thing about the wall is that when I hear people arguing about the price of the wall, when I say pay what the person wants, what I really mean by that is pay what the person wants. Because when we get into the amounts of money that are spent by this government, $10 billion a day, and we're talking about a project that defends the national security and the territorial integrity of the country, and we have a federal government who's tasked to protect this country, and that federal government spends $10 billion a day, you can't tell me that somehow we can't find another half day's worth of taxation over the course of the 3 or 4 years it would take to dedicate to this wall. Even if you were to take that $5 billion, and I'm a big defense guy, even if you were just to lift $5 billion out of the $600 billion defense budget, just lift $5 billion out, that would be a much better expense than some other things that we're paying for on a daily basis. So when I hear stories like this and I hear cases like this and professors intoning in serious terms that you conservatives are contradicting yourself because you're advocating the stealing of somebody's private property, first of all, as far as I know, no one's private property is being stolen and no one is filing a complaint. Secondly, if it turns out that somebody does have this complaint, we are again dealing with a very narrow stretch of what has to be, by definition, one end of his property. Nobody's got a piece of property that the U.S. border runs down the middle of. So we're talking about a margin.
But Bill, your entire point here is predicated on the idea that somehow the executive branch can negotiate with these landowners. The point that the CNN article that quotes this UT property law professor is making is twofold. Number one is property owners could sue to fight any kind of takings effort. And number two is Congress may say we're not going to exercise our right to eminent domain because, frankly, the majority in Congress opposes what President Trump is trying to do. So this is where Democrats could stop this.
Okay.
And
all right. So
if any of this is
clearly
is
I made the mistake.
in court. No, that's okay. I'm just saying.
No. What I was just going to say is clearly I made the mistake of assuming that this was a practical issue, and not a chance to stop the wall issue. That was a complete oversight on my part. No, I'm serious. No. To me, it just sounds like a problem that can be solved relatively easily.
And unfortunately, you're burdened with this common sense attitude of life. It's a burden you must carry.
It is, a cross to bear.
That's right.
Okay, so Congress won't vote So they're going to vote the money, but they're not going to vote the
Well,
eminent
they
domain?
voted some money. I mean, they voted $1.3 billion, but they didn't give the president everything he wanted. And clearly,
So
it's
presumably-
possible for Democrats to tie this project up even further.
All right. Well,
outside of
if
the
you want to
money
play this
argument.
if you want to play this political game, then let's play the political game. They dedicated roughly, let's just say a fifth. Let's just say 20% of the total expenditure of the wall has been allocated. Correct?
Roughly.
Okay. So from this, we can assume that at least 20% of the border wall, having had money allocated to it from Congress, at least 20% of the total length of the border wall also would include the eminent domain argument for that 20% of the wall.
And that's
You
an
can't very
argument
well-
that some lawyers are making. In fact, that point that you make right there is the other side of the argument, where they're basically saying the case could be made that because Congress did allocate some funds for this, it follows naturally that the right to take that land was assumed in it.
Well, when we say take the land, I just want to make this crystal clear. Pay for the land.
Sure.
And I want to reiterate again, pay for a strip of somebody's property on the edge that is not terribly, terribly deep. So, yes, but the point is, yes, if this is what they've done, 20% of the wall is not 20 miles. It's a 2,000-mile border. That's a significant stretch of wall. And so how does Congress pretend to allocate money for something and then say, oh, and the stuff that we allocated money for you to build, we're not going to allow you to build procedurally. Now, look, I have no doubt that's what's going on because, as I say, it took me a while to actually connect the fact that this is politics and people like this professor and everybody else are looking for any reason they possibly can to stop this. But Donald Trump has the personal power. I'm talking about the celebrity appeal, the media power, not so much the constitutional power, because I personally think if Barack Obama could declare a state of emergency for us to help out in Syria and Libya and all the rest of it, helping out in the United States, not such a high hurdle. I think high hurdle declare. I think you can make that case compellingly. But in terms of the politics of it, if I was Donald Trump, then I would go directly to the American people, and I would simply say, "What's going on? You wanted the wall. We're building the wall. Congress agreed to fund a fifth of the wall, so we're going to start building that fifth of the wall. Now Congress will not allow us to use the money that they allocated to build the wall to build the wall." What is going on with these liars, thieves, and miscreants? Why doesn't somebody just do that? Why doesn't somebody like Donald Trump just simply come out and state the obvious? You allocated money for the wall because you were under political pressure to do so. And now you're trying to block the funding, the actual construction of the wall, because the Democratic Party sees the wall and the protection of the southern border as a terminal threat to its ability to gain power in the United States through a free election held by the citizens of the United States.
And so
just come out and say it.
Your theory there is that either one of two eventualities could occur. Number one is that enough votes would be swayed in Congress because they realize they're threatened by the next election, that he could get what he wanted as far as the necessary eminent domain takings. Or number two, the next election would come along, and in fact, those people who stood in his way would be chucked out of office, and then he'd have the votes that he needed in Congress to get that piece of land.
In my opinion, the single greatest error of the Trump administration for the first term anyway is that this didn't happen immediately, that it was not a national priority that it was made out to be during the campaign. This thing should have been on the first day he gets sworn in. Day two, he's on the border supervising the building, walking up and down the desert with a hard hat on. Now, that didn't happen, and there's nothing I can do about that not happening. But the fact of the matter remains that the majority of the American people want some kind of protection, and they want the national sovereignty of the United States to remain intact. And as I said 100 times, we apparently need a wall because the progressives wouldn't let us have a border. So you have to put the progressives on the needle. You have to put them on the wedge of the fulcrum. You have to say, which one is it? Tell me what the position of the Democratic members of this Congress really is. Because you voted money to fund part of the wall. That's what the American people want in overwhelming numbers. But you're also blocking the wall. So that's telling me that you don't want the wall made, but you want to be seen that you do want it made because you know the American people in large numbers want the wall. So you're basically lying to the American people by saying, well, since you want a wall, yeah, no, national security is very important to us. Remember that thing with Chucky and Nancy, where they were talking about how committed they were to our southern border security. Okay, you've got them on camera. So you said you want border security. I want border security. Fantastic. We went to Congress. We followed all the constitutional procedures. You voted a money equivalent to 1/5 of the wall. I'm about to start building that 1/5 of the wall. And now you will not allow me to build that 1/5 of the wall because you're not going to do the constitutional prerogatives that you have. And I want to know why. And not just me. 150, 180 other million Americans would like to know why and what you're doing. What are you doing? Are you for it or against it? If you're for it and you've allocated the money, then simply make the legislation available so that this can happen. And if you vote for the money but then try and stop it with the legislation, then that is evidence that you are not only not ambivalent about this is evidence that you are lying to the American people by telling them you want something that you are actually fighting tooth and nail to prevent. And I'm reminded very much of something I'd never realized before, but it was during one of these hearings on Hillary Clinton's email server a couple years ago, and Trey Gowdy, who I admire enormously, I just absolutely think he's one of the 3 or 4 people that ever went to Washington in my lifetime who went there for the right reason, but Trey Gowdy said when he was talking about Hillary Clinton's email server, he said that he would rather have evidence of cover-up, evidence of duplicity. He said, as a prosecutor, as a professional prosecutor, I would rather have ironclad evidence that somebody was lying about something that they did. I'd rather have that than a confession. And that made perfect sense to me. Perfect sense to me. The evidence that Hillary Clinton committed a crime is that Hillary Clinton used a bleach and wiped it clean like with a cloth. That's the evidence that she committed this action. And that point from Trey Gowdy I thought was a profoundly good point. And I think somebody, I'd like it to be Trey or somebody, needs to say, okay, you've said one thing, you've done another. I am asking you on camera in front of the American people. I'm not talking about a reporter because you're never going to get a reporter to do that. Which one is it? And tell us which one it is, and then we're going to hold you to it. If you indeed say, no, we back the wall, then give us the legislation that we need to do the wall. If, on the other hand, you decide that you're not going to use this eminent domain powers when or if they are needed, okay, well, in that case, you have given money to the wall project to lie to the American people about your true intentions, but your true intentions are revealed by your action, which is blocking the creation of this wall.
Well, we're ferreting out the true intentions of our national leaders every day here at Bill Whittle Now. It's made possible by the folks at BillWhittle.com who have become members of that organization, this enterprise, and have joined together with others in order to fund the production and distribution of these programs. We are certainly grateful to them for that. You can join that team if you'd like, the citizen producers at BillWhittle.com, by going there and clicking that Become a Member link. We've got exciting things coming up, and even this very day, which I can't tell you because you may not be a member, so you're going to have to become a member first to find out what I'm talking about.
Ooh.
But in any case, I think you'll find it well worth your while to become a member, even at the $9.95 a month level. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.